Hi friends, subscribe to me, it's important, and listen to the real story of my friend. Title: Broken Promises and Unspoken Words. David had always been a man of hard work and faith. At 43, he had built a life centered around his family and his devotion to God. He was a man who believed in providing for his wife, Julia, and their 4 children, no matter the cost. Their home was a modest but cozy house in a quiet neighborhood, filled with love and the echoes of children's laughter. The house was small, but it had character. The kitchen was the heart of their home, where Julia often prepared meals with the kids running around her legs. The walls were decorated with drawings the children made, and the floors had the worn-out charm of a house lived in with love. Their days were filled with the chaos of raising children, 3 healthy, spirited ones, and their youngest, Luke, who was born with special needs. Luke's condition was a challenge for the family. He required constant attention, medical visits, and therapy. It was exhausting for Julia, who was the primary caregiver, while David worked long hours doing home repairs to support them financially. There were moments of joy, of course, but the burden of responsibility weighed heavy on them both. Julia's days were spent running after their kids, changing diapers, feeding Luke, and trying to keep some semblance of order in the house. The nights were her only escape. After the kids were tucked into bed, she would sit at the small kitchen table, pour herself a cup of coffee, and, for the first time all day, feel like she could breathe. One night, as the house finally grew quiet, Julia sat down at the computer. She hadn't planned on anything happening. She just wanted a distraction, a moment for herself. But that night, something changed. She stumbled across a chat room, one that seemed harmless enough, and there she met a man named Greg. He was 47, living in another state far from her world, far from the chaos of children and marriage. At first, it was innocent. They talked about simple things, life, books, music. But as the days turned into weeks, the conversations deepened. Greg listened in ways that David never could. He wasn't weighed down by the demands of family life or the exhaustion that came with it. Julia began to look forward to their talks. She would rush through the kids' bedtime routine, her mind already at the computer, already with Greg. One evening, as they messaged back and forth, Greg asked, "What do you really want, Julia? What's missing in your life?" She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keys. "I don't know. I love my kids, but sometimes I feel like I'm drowning." Greg's reply was swift. "You deserve to be happy too. You can't live just for others." And that was it. A seed had been planted, and over the following months, Julia became consumed by her secret life. She would smile at David during dinner, but feel nothing. When she held Luke, she loved him, but there was an aching sense of emptiness she couldn't shake. It was a cold winter night when Julia made her decision. She tucked the kids into bed, kissed each one good night, and then went downstairs to write a letter. Her hand shook as she scribbled the words that she never thought she would write. "David, I can't do this anymore. I need to find myself again. I'm leaving. I'm sorry, but I have to go. I hope you understand one day." There was no mention of the children, no promises to return, just an explanation of her need to escape. She packed a small bag and left the house without a word. The sound of her children sleeping upstairs haunted her as she closed the door behind her. But she didn't turn back. She got into her car and drove across state lines to meet Greg, leaving her family behind. David's world collapses. David found the note the next morning. At first, he couldn't believe it. He searched the house, calling out her name, but she was gone. His heart sank as the reality of the situation hit him like a punch to the gut. He sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the note, his hands shaking. The kids were waking up now, unaware that their mother had left them. How could he tell them? How could he explain something he didn't understand himself? Later that day, after the initial shock had worn off, he called her, but the phone went straight to voicemail. "Julia, please, come home. The kids need you. I need you," he begged, his voice cracking with emotion. But there was no answer. In the weeks that followed, David tried to hold it all together. He had no choice. He had 4 kids to care for, including Luke, who required constant attention. His work suffered. his heart heavy with the pain of betrayal. But he soldiered on, praying every night for strength. Months passed, and Julia remained distant. She no longer called, no longer asked about the kids. She had disappeared into a new life with Greg, far away from the home they once shared. For David, every day was a struggle. He would tuck the kids in at night and feel the crushing weight of loneliness. One evening, after another unanswered phone call, he made a decision of his own. Sitting at the table, he called a lawyer and filed for child support. "I can't keep doing this alone. She needs to take responsibility," he muttered as he filled out the paperwork. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. The children deserved their mother's support, even if she couldn't be there in person. 2 years later. 2 years had passed since Julia left. David was still in the same house, but everything had changed. He was now both mother and father, balancing work and raising 4 children. The weight of it all never left him, but he had grown stronger. The children were his world, and they were growing, even little Luke, who needed extra care but had a spirit that kept the family going. But Julia had never returned. She had stopped calling, stopped asking about her children. The courts had ordered her to pay child support, but she was still distant, a ghost from the past. Greg had faded too, their relationship apparently not as solid as it had seemed in the beginning. David remained alone, trying to find peace in the chaos of raising his children. The thought of dating again seemed impossible. Who would want to be with a man who has 4 kids? He would often ask himself, sighing heavily as he prepared meals or folded laundry. But his faith remained strong. He prayed every night, asking for the strength to continue, to be the father his children deserved. Reader comments. Heartbroken Mom. This story hits so close to home. I can't imagine how hard it must be for David. It's so painful when someone you love just leaves without warning. Faithful Dead 44. As a single father myself, I feel this deeply. The weight of raising kids alone is indescribable, but I'm glad David is staying strong for his children. Hope for tomorrow. It's heartbreaking to think she didn't even consider her kids when she left. I hope David finds peace and that Julia realizes what she's lost before it's too late. Real Talker. It's so sad to see how easy it is for some people to just walk away from their responsibilities. David deserves someone who will stand by him through thick and thin. Please consider subscribing for more stories like this. And as Truman said, good morning. And in case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.